Thanks, Alexandra. I think it's very fitting to go from talking about intelligent machines to dumb humans, so this is kind of apropos. So the presentation is called WTF is Web3, but I will keep this PG, so don't worry about that. Just to kind of start to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm the lead steward and architect of NorthStarDAO, and NorthStarDAO is a nonprofit where we're trying to help bring the mainstream to Web3. And we do that through education, so hence why I'm here today. But we also do that through advocating at all three levels of government. So I myself have testified twice before the House Committee on Industry and Technology, and we advise other levels of government about why we need to make the investment in Web3 today. You know, I'm also kind of a nonprofit in the sense that I've got a startup. So I'm the CEO of a company called BizBridge, which is all about reinventing the way that small to medium businesses are being bought and sold using AI. And then I also am executive director of a nonprofit called Pathfinders for Ukraine, which is an organization I founded as a half Ukrainian when I quit my job last year during the full-scale invasion. Went to Poland and Ukraine, helped people get their emergency visas, ran the Canada desk at a Warsaw Central Station, and now focus on political advocacy where we work with members of parliament and the minister on policy with Ukrainian resettlement. And then, yeah, I've already gone to NorthStarDAO, but ultimately our North Star is our belief that Web3 is this kind of promised prosperity that we want to bring to all Canadians from an economic, societal, and personal level. So the question is, WTF is Web3? And we get this question a lot, often phrased in that way. And to many people, the answer is Web3 is what comes after Web 2. Very smarmy kind of response. But to other people, Web3, represents a lot of different things. And it's a little bit of our own doing. So, some people say it's the currency of money laundering. Some people talk about the kind of dehumanized versions of manifestations in like the metaverse. Some people think of Sam Bankman-Fried, who, committed a classic fraud but had nothing to do with the technology. And it's really made it difficult for our industry to kind of get a reputation of credibility. And then other people think of things like monkey JPEGs and things like that through NFTs, and hearing about these stories about these young kids that are making millions of dollars. But really, Web3 is the evolution of the internet. And it's not something that's in the future, actually. It's something that we truly believe is something we're actually in the middle of right now. You just don't know it. So what's the kind of evolution of the internet that we're talking about? So Web 1 is often described as the read-only internet. So if you think about it, that was you being able to visit a web page that's hosted somewhere, right? This was the very early days of the internet where there were open protocols that allowed people to build websites, and you could consume information, visit the website, and that was kind of the end of the story. And so it was more corporately central, so you had folks like AOL that would host websites and things like that. And so it was very much about consuming information, but no kind of interaction level. Web 2 is described as the read-write internet. So it's a bit more dynamic, and this kind of emerged especially as social media came up, where you became a bit of a content creator yourself by being able to post images to Instagram, share your thoughts about what was going on through Twitter. And what this was really about was, even though you were creating content, these were walled gardens of data, because this was data that, even though you were the creator of it, was owned by the Facebooks and things like that. And that's why you were ultimately the product. You were creating the data that was being monetized by those companies. And so in the first case, where they were monetizing by being the host of these websites, in the second, that you are the product itself by creating that data. And in Web 3, it's described as the read, write, and own internet. So not only are you able to kind of access information, create content, but now you possess that information. Or another way that I kind of describe it as the internet of you. So being able to create an internet around your preferences, being able to own and monetize and do things with the data that you have. And so it's Unlike being static or dynamic, it's intelligent, it's adaptive, it's responsive because it knows a lot more about you. It's about transacting peer-to-peer. So instead of you interacting with a centralized authority like posting to Facebook, you're able to interact more one-to-one. And I'll talk more about that, how that translates in like things like DeFi. And then this is ultimately about being able to create, own your content, own your assets, and being able to earn and monetize off that. So the way that I think about Web3 is a lot of people think about it in the kind of technologies first. They say blockchain, they say cryptocurrencies, NFTs, things like that. But I like to think about it the other way, to start with principles. So some of the key principles behind Web3 are decentralization and interoperability. So this idea of that no single person owns this kind of, things like the blockchain or things like that. And that the intention is that there's portability with data, that it doesn't matter if you're in one kind of website or within one environment, it should be able to be kind of transported across. And I'll talk about how those technologies enable that. There's this term trustlessness, which sounds a lot like a bad thing, but what that's all about is actually to remove intermediaries. So the idea that you're able to transact peer-to-peer, we don't need to know each other. We can trust the technology, the code that sits between us to actually do that work without us having to know each other, to trust each other. We trust in the code to execute what it is that we want. And it enables those peer-to-peer relationships. The idea of self-sovereignty, so the control over your property, your data, your identities. So really the ability to kind of hold things within your wallet, and I'll talk about what wallets are, but this is really about not giving possession, again, to centralized authorities. And then finally, this idea of monetization, and a lot of this has to do with the incentive mechanisms, things like tokens and things like that, that help actually reinforce the way that Web3 works. And then the technologies, you've probably heard about a lot of these, like blockchain. Blockchain's like the decentralized data backbone that really underpins the entire kind of Web3 ethos. And the way to simply think about blockchain is generally it's a open public database versus a private database. So the idea that it's open, you can access the information there. It's run by multiple different computers, so it's not a centralized server that sits in Palo Alto with Facebook. It's actually something that's run across computers and nodes all around the world. So if you unplug one, you still have all the data that sits across those other nodes. Smart contracts. So smart contracts are really the mechanisms that create that trustlessness. So it's essentially a programmability on top of a blockchain. So being able to instruct it to do something based upon different conditions and actions, it's able to execute these programs. And this is actually an innovation born out of Toronto. Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, started it out of or introduced his white paper for the first time at Popper's Pub on Bloor Street after a Bitcoin meetup. So Toronto is a birthplace, but not a home currently, of Web3. And he came from Waterloo, that's right, that's right. And wallets, so I'll talk more about this later, but wallets are the holders of your tokens, your assets, your identity, and things like that. And then finally, tokens are representations of value. So this is not just money. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are, again, an asset that is essentially a container within the token to say, this is who possesses this particular asset. So think of tokens more like a container than a coin. And then also some people talk about how Web3 is also inclusive of things like AI, and I do believe that there's a symbiosis between AI and Web3. And then there's other technologies like metaverse, augmented reality, virtual reality, and things like that. So those are the kind of two sides of the things. Think about it more in principles, and the reason why principles is a good way to think about it is that the technology is perpetually evolving. And so if you think about things that fit into these principles, the technologies are starting to kind of evolve and emerge after, and even things like Bitcoin is evolving, something that people thought has not really changed since 2008. So I'm going to start by talking about the kind of principles in action through these actual examples of how they're being used today. And some people may think that Web3 is this esoteric kind of Bitcoin bro kind of you know, esoteric thing that not many people will actually access. But the reality is that the market cap of all the cryptocurrencies is over $1 trillion. So it puts it, you know, roughly on par to an Apple. There's over 3 billion tokenized assets, so things like real estate, securities, and things like that that are currently being traded. And NFTs are a multi-billion dollar, I believe there was $30 billion of value transacted last year. So it's not a cottage industry and it's not some, you know, obscure class. It's actually becoming more and more mainstream. So when we think about blockchain, I mentioned, you know, it's this open, you know, public database of information that is constantly being kind of built onto. I'm not going to talk about the tech as much today because, you know, when we talk about the internet, we don't need to talk about, you know, HTTP or TCP, ICP, or sorry, IP. But I'm going to talk about the principles and the practices of it. So when it comes to blockchain, it's about transparency. So the ability to kind of see what's on there, making it accessible to others, and allow it to do things like traceability, auditability, and things like that. Immutability refers to the ability, or sorry, refers to the fact that once something is put on chain, it can't be changed unless there's a kind of consensus to fork it and create a new blockchain, but I won't go into that. And then finally, it's distributed. So as I mentioned before, there's no single point of ownership or failure because there's no, you know, majority owner of those tokens. So the ownership of the kind of blockchain is distributed, and the kind of people who add to the blocks who are paid for through cryptocurrencies is distributed across multiple nodes. So what does this look like in real life? So from an auditability perspective, Walmart's pharmacy is actually using blockchain to track their pharmaceuticals, and in particular when it comes to things like opioids, where there's these really difficult challenges with chain of custody. So ensuring that they can track the drugs, because instead of a private database like what Walmart might have, think about all the different people that touch those pharmaceuticals, the shipping, the local pharmacy, the pharmaceutical manufacturer. By having a public blockchain, each part in that supply chain is able to access, add to, and be able to see the validity of those transactions and to see that what they have in front of them was part of this chain. And it's in particular useful for other things like provenance with art and luxury goods. So for example, to track like certificates of authenticity, by putting it onto the blockchain, you can keep that record forever, and it's something that can be checked by anyone. Whereas, you know, certificate of authenticities are issued by auction houses. You have to call the auction house or things like that. This is something that's a public record, so that, for example, with this company here, what they've done is, so Everledger, what they've done is they've embedded tiny little chips in their diamonds. And by tapping your phone onto the diamond, it activates an NFC chip that'll show you the NFT that essentially is tied to that to say that, yes, this is the facts behind that diamond. It's real. That record is on the blockchain. You don't need to contact De Beers to ask, is this a legit diamond? It's all there on the blockchain. And then finally, from a permanence perspective, so once something's on chain, it's the record there. Verifiable credentials. So for example, MIT has started to issue things like diplomas or certificates on the blockchain. So right now, on LinkedIn, for example, people can pretty much make up whatever they want, right? And so with a verifiable credential, though, you can actually look onto the blockchain to see whether or not who issued it. Was it the MIT wallet that issued it? And was this actually issued to the wallet holder? So does this person actually hold the certificate from MIT? And in fact, Wikipedia is even using blockchain to put all of its data onto to create that permanence. And so just to talk a little quickly about blockchain in terms of the transaction rates. So if you compare Solana, so Solana is a blockchain that's all about scalability. It's able to process 65,000 transactions per second. And if you compare that to Visa, Visa can only process 24,000 transactions per second. And Solana is able to do it for fractions of a cent, whereas Visa, you know, takes its percentages and has all these other costs associated with it. So smart contracts. So smart contracts represent the end of the middleman. And as I mentioned, these are all about programmability on top of the blockchain to enable things like creating these conditions. So those are the kind of terms of the smart contract. And to write a smart contract, you don't need to be a lawyer. You're essentially creating, some sort of process that needs conditions to be fulfilled in order to execute some form of action. And so what it does is it enables the elimination of middlemen because it reduces the cost of administering an action and it increases the speed of it. And then finally, it creates a trigger to action. You can't edit a smart contract once it's written. So the code of the contract is law. So what does that look like in real life? Well, in terms of smart contracts, you can use it to create data portability. So for example, SolveCare is a company that I was helping out in Florida. And what they do is they enable you to say, who do you want to have access your health records so that your GP, the hospital, the radiologist are all able to access those records. As someone who worked in healthcare before, I can tell you that those permissions are incredibly difficult through all these different kind of paperwork and things like that. But what SolveCare has been able to do is to create that backbone using blockchain and those permissions to make that data accessible by any of those people who are given permission. So automating non-value added activities. Who here owns a home? There's a lot of millennials here, so I guess no. So in terms of automating non-valued activities, so when it comes to real estate, there's a lot of activities that are just kind of vestiges of the system where they've been able to charge these large fees. So everything from escrow to title transfer and things like that. The agent isn't doing a hell of a lot when it comes to those things, but this is where smart contracts can come into play. So Propy, for example, can do everything from allow for peer-to-peer trading of real estate, so you can eliminate the agent entirely. It's able to do the escrow automatically, so once those deposits happen, the smart contract is able to execute the release of the cash. And so ultimately, it's eliminating these non-value-add activities that otherwise, a homeowner would have to pay thousands, tens of thousands of dollars for. And it's able to do it instantly rather than wait days and days for lawyers to sign off. And then in terms of actioning decisions, so DAOs and investment DAOs are essentially vehicles to be able to decide if we've got a pool of money and we want to say that this group of people who have pooled the money will invest in whatever people vote for. Gitcoin is a great example of this. It's essentially a nonprofit that allows people to say, okay, we're going to donate all this money to this pool, and whatever gets the most votes, we'll allocate towards. So in a smart contract, which says that we will allocate dollars based upon the percentage of voting, it can do it automatically. And it won't be kind of disturbed by someone who, let's say, overrides the decision or decides to, they don't like those investments. It actions it without needing to trust that the person who's administering the fund is not going to misallocate the funding. So wallets. So wallets are all about things like holding your assets. Like I mentioned, it can hold your art, it can hold tokens, which are cryptocurrencies. It can even hold your identity. And your wallet is a form of your identity if you think about it, because what's within your wallet is a source of, if you think about the art that you hold, the cryptocurrencies you hold, the identities. There's some people who give you tokens for when you attend an event now. So for example, some of these sports leagues have started to issue these tokens called proof of attendance protocols, so that you have this record that shows that you were there, it was issued at that time, and it's issued only to you. So that becomes part of your identity. And if you think about social media, which tries to come up with your identity based upon your likes or based upon who is it you're connected to, this is a more accurate kind of representation of your identity because it shows all these different tokens and these little footprints or bookmarks of your life that sit within your wallet. And this creates a new dynamic for marketers to kind of say, hey, we know for a fact that this wallet holds these types of tokens, and therefore we can target them to do things like airdrops. So this is a way to kind of cross-promote or identify a certain type of user with a greater degree of kind of understanding of who this person really is. And then finally, the control of ownership. So again, this gives you the opportunity to decide within that wallet, what is it you do want to share? What is it you don't want to share? Do you want to kind of stake some of those tokens to earn things on top of it? So these are kind of different ways that a wallet plays a role. Now, Starbucks, interestingly, launched one of the largest kind of wallet campaigns recently. So a major brand like Starbucks, with Starbucks Rewards, which is obviously one of the world's largest and most beloved loyalty programs, they launched their Starbucks Odyssey in the United States to 2 million users, and unbeknownst to 2 million coffee drinkers, they actually became wallet holders. And what Starbucks is doing with it is that they became Polygon wallet holders, and in it, they are given kind of these tasks to either on the app to do games and things like that to earn these rewards, which are actually currencies. They can earn these stamps, which are actually NFTs. They can earn it in real life or in-app. And actually, they're able to do things like trade those NFTs that they've earned. So actually, there's been 100,000 NFT transactions on the app worth $50 million. And some of these NFTs, as they collect them or purchase them and gather them, they're able to unlock these in real life rewards. And I think the top reward for Starbucks Odyssey is actually getting to visit a plantation in Costa Rica where they grow the coffee. So these are kind of new ways of using wallets to engage people, again, by earning these rewards, earning these tokens, or transacting these tokens between people to unlock new ways to engage customers. And then tokenization is something I'm particularly interested in. So when I was in venture capital, one of the early companies that we invested in was Canada's first licensed issuer of security tokens. So security in the sense that of like the Securities and Exchange Commission, so equity in something, not as in cybersecurity. And so tokenization is an incredibly interesting area because what it does is it enables you to own anything. And what I mean by that is it can create a representation on the blockchain of any asset you can imagine. And what it can do not only is create and represent that ownership, it can fractionalize it into infinitesimal sizes. So it's not just like buying one share certificate. You can buy a third of a share certificate. You can fractionalize real estate, so you can own a fraction of that real estate, not buy the whole building, but participate in the ownership of a condo, for example. It's going to unlock trapped liquidity. What I mean by that is that not every company, and I hope my company one day will, IPO. It's very difficult. It needs a certain size. You need to meet certain conditions and things like that. But with tokenization, you can issue those tokens as ownership in your company and essentially IPO anything. And so you can create liquidity that was never there. So this is relevant to whether you're a small to medium business. The cafe can start to issue equity in their own business, their most loyal customers. At the time in 2017, we pitched to the NHL to use this as a way to engage fans, to give your most loyal fans ownership in the team. And so there's these new kind of ways to turn fans into owners, which we think is an elevation of true kind of loyalty. And then finally, you can attach not just only financial benefits in terms of representations of a stake and profit. You can use that almost as your membership card. You can represent a discount. So if I'm a token holder in this company or in this business, I can get access to discounts when I show up to the game. Or you can be enabled to vote on things. So token holders get to vote on the new team colors or things like that. So because of this programmability of the token, you're able to not do much more than just what a share certificate does. You can elevate it even further. And so BCG, for example, estimates by 2030, tokenization will be a $16 trillion industry. And Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, said that this is the future of finance. And I truly do believe that this is true because if you think about all these asset classes that will be taken off the sidelines, it creates accessibility to anyone to invest. It's this completely new paradigm when it comes to finance. And so as I mentioned in practice, Micro Ventures is able to issue these micro IPOs. So startups are issuing STOs in their companies, not having to go public on a stock exchange. And so if you think about for early founders who, let's say, need cash, but have these businesses that are growing and growing and growing, they're able to cash out a little bit earlier. It allows for easy and fast transactions. So Citigroup just last week announced that they're going to be tokenizing deposits. And why would they do that? Well, they see it as an opportunity to essentially allow for greater speed and lower cost to transactions. Because as I mentioned, sometimes settlement of things like payments or things like that, may have heard of T+3, where it takes 3 days to settle things overnight. There's back-end processes that need to happen with settlement. This happens instantly. So they're able to transfer money internally instantly at practically zero cost because the blockchain enables you to do it just for these minor gas fees. And then finally, as I mentioned, with fan ownership, Justin Bieber just recently announced with the company Accident that they are going to tokenize the song Company. So they allowed for 2,000 fans to buy a token which represents a 1% royalty on all plays of the song Company. So this elevates, again, the fan experience where the more people, they're already listening to the damn song, so they may as well cash in on it, right? And so they're able to actually participate, and those token holders also get to unlock other benefits that they expect to offer, like being able to potentially meet Justin at a concert or things like that. So again, these are new ways to kind of unlock this idea of fan ownership. So just to kind of talk about what to watch on the horizon. So as I mentioned, one of the key things that we really focus on in the DAO is that we believe this is the future of Web3 and that Canada needs to address it in order to stay competitive. And this report came out in June of this year out of the House Committee on Industry and Technology, which essentially said Canada needs a national blockchain strategy. And that's something that we as the DAO, which represents dozens of CEOs, investors, creators and artists in the Web3 community, we're coming together to come up with what that national blockchain strategy might look like. And so we see other countries like Singapore, UAE, South Korea, they're all taking Web3 seriously. In fact, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak recently said that he wants to make the UK the Web3 hub of the world, and have said that one of the 3 pillars of their $3.5 billion pound investment technology is Web3, alongside AI and clean tech. So Web3 is being taken seriously, not yet by Canada, and we want to make a difference in making that happen faster. The second thing I'll mention is that I think AI people will become Web3 people and vice versa. An example that I can give is that if you think about the compute power, and Anna talked about the need for compute, right? And you hear about the GPUs that are required to help with all this processing. There just isn't enough. There's people that we know that I've been speaking to that are working on allowing the compute power that's on your phones or your laptops to be given to essentially do some of this processing, and especially as the technology gets better, you need an incentive mechanism for that, right? How are you going to pay people to allow them to use your compute? Or think about how Elon Musk talked about being able to use self-driving cars, allowing it to kind of run itself while you have it parked, it can go and earn you money while it's instead of sitting there in the lot. There needs to be some form of incentive model behind it, right? And so this is where a cryptocurrency can kind of play that role so that any user of that compute power or any user of that car, it doesn't have to be through that particular app. There's a way to kind of enable that transaction through incentives like cryptocurrency, which are accessible by anyone with a wallet. And then there's a lot of other kind of applications where Web3 people need AI. So for example, with smart contracts is actually kind of a misnomer because they're actually kind of dumb, because they do exactly as they're told within the code. But if we could use AIs to help either create the smart contracts or help with administering the smart contracts, I believe that we'll be able to elevate what it is that smart contracts are actually able to do with things like agents or things like that. And then finally, like I said, Web3, we truly do believe will unlock new frontiers of prosperity for people. And Web3 people, you know, they do have a bad reputation because of, you know, the degens and some of the frauds and things like that. But ultimately, there's actually a quote by Peter Thiel who said that AI people are communists and Web3 people are libertarians. And what he means by that is that AI people are all about centralizing data and being able to use it to essentially help create better, more intelligent models. And Web3 people are all about essentially, you know, freedom, the ability to give control back to the person. And he wasn't referring to their political slant, but it's more about the ethos of it, right? Because Web3 people want to help empower each of us to take the benefits of these technologies and take it away from necessarily like the centralized authorities that helped kind of you know, extract the value that we put into it through our data. And the real kind of testament to this is what started a lot of this was the Bitcoin white paper, which was written by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008. And if you think about the genesis of Web3 and the Bitcoin white paper, 2008 was the year of the global financial crisis. And what, no one knows who Satoshi is, but the belief is what he saw, or they saw, was the corruption and the collapse of a system that relied too much on central authorities who didn't have the best interests of the individuals, the deposit holders, the people that trusted the system. And so that was the genesis, and that's why a lot of the Web3 people believe so much in giving power back to the people. And that's why we hope, you know, it'll give benefit to you in your life. So WTF is Web3? Well, Web3 is the future. That's what WTF is. Thank you.